the 2026 FIFA World Cup Final may not have been won by Spain alone. It may have been decided by a hidden number that was waiting for Ferran Torres in the 106th minute. Everyone expected the future to wear Yamal's face, or the ending to stay trapped inside Messi's shadow. But numerology points to something stranger. The chosen finisher may have been Ferran, and the chosen clock may have been 106. Why does that matter? Because 106 reduces to 7, the number of delayed revelation. Spain reduces to 23, then to 5, the same number as this 23rd FIFA World Cup. And Ferran Torres carries one of the cleanest hidden finisher patterns in the whole Spain story. So when Spain beat Argentina 1-0 after extra time on July 19, 2026, this may not have been a random late goal at all. It may have been the exact moment this final had been waiting to reveal. And if that sounds impossible, stay with me, because once you see why this goal arrived this late, you will understand why some of the most life-changing victories only appear after the ordinary window has already closed. This is symbolic storytelling, not science, not betting advice, and not a claim that numbers control football. Finals are still won through tactics, courage, substitutions, discipline, and execution under unbearable pressure. But after a match like this, numerology can sometimes explain why one result feels narratively exact in a way people can sense even before they can describe it. And this final feels exact. Let us begin with the largest layer first. Spain reduces to 23, then to 5, in English Pythagorean numerology. This was also the 23rd Men's FIFA World Cup. So before we even get to Ferran Torres, before we get to Yamal, before we get to Messi, Spain was already carrying the same number as the tournament itself. That matters because 5 is movement, disruption, transition, youth, speed, risk, and the refusal to stay trapped inside an older structure. 5 is not a comfortable champion number in the same way 8 is. 8 looks like power. 8 looks like command. 8 looks like a trophy cabinet. 5 looks like motion forcing history to change shape. That was Spain's energy all through this World Cup. Not preservation, not monument, movement. And when the team named 23 wins the 23rd World Cup, the result starts feeling bigger than a single match. It starts feeling like the tournament recognized itself in the champion. That is why Spain's title already looked coherent at the team level. But coherence at the team level is not the same thing as destiny at the human level. That is where Ferran Torres enters the frame. A lot of viewers expected the symbolic center of Spain's future to look like Yamal. That made sense. Yamal's famous 19 reduces to 1. 1 is emergence, naming, arrival, the public birth of a new identity. In numerology, Yamal still looks like an opening figure, a threshold figure, a player whose presence tells you the next chapter is already standing in the doorway. But that does not automatically mean he had to score the winning goal. That is a very important distinction. Sometimes one player carries the atmosphere of the future, and another player is chosen to turn that atmosphere into a result. Sometimes one player opens the symbolic door, and another player walks through it and locks the sentence into history. That is the angle that makes Ferran Torres so interesting here. Ferran Torres was born on February 29, 2000. Start with the day number itself. 29 reduces to 11, then to 2. 11 is one of those numbers people often describe as heightened, intuitive, and unusually sensitive to timing. Then it reduces to 2, which is about reception, relationship, positioning, and the ability to feel where the opening is before everyone else fully understands it. 2 is not usually the loud conquering emperor. It is much more often the hidden reader of space, the player who appears at the right second because he felt the pattern turning before the room did. That already sounds like a very believable profile for the scorer of a delayed winner. Now reduce the full birth date. February 29th, 2000 gives 15, and 15 reduces to 6. 6 is responsibility, closure, burden, finishing, and the act of carrying something all the way into visible form. 6 is not only beauty or warmth, In high-pressure settings, 6 can look like somebody being asked to complete the emotional labor of the moment, to finish the thing, to take the half-formed shape and give it a final outline. Put those two layers together, and Ferran's pattern becomes surprisingly elegant for this exact role. The 11/2 says he is not the wrong kind of player for a hidden opening. He can fit the delayed, relational, almost waiting quality of the final. The 6 says that once the opening arrives, he can become the person who turns tension into a finished object. That is why I do not read Ferran Torres here as a random scorer who just happened to be standing in the right place. Numerologically, he fits the job. He fits the idea of a player who is not the loudest prophecy before kickoff, but who becomes the right human instrument once the match needs a conclusion. And now we need to talk about the timing. The goal came in the 106th minute. 1 plus 0 plus 6 gives 7. 7 is one of the clearest delayed answer numbers in numerology. 7 hides. 7 waits. 7 refuses the obvious surface resolution. 7 often behaves like a number that says the first window was not enough. Keep going. The visible script is not the whole script. The answer exists, but it lives one layer deeper than people expected. That is exactly what extra time felt like in this final. 90 minutes did not settle the question. The match had to move beyond the public frame of ordinary football time. Only then did the truth appear. That is deeply 7-like. If the winning goal had come in the 22nd minute or the 31st minute, the symbolic feeling would have been completely different. It would have felt like an early seizure of control, maybe a statement, maybe even a rush. But the 106th minute is not rush energy. It is revelation energy. It says the answer had to be uncovered, not announced. And this is where Ferran's own numbers start looking even more appropriate. Yamal's 19/1 is easy to read as announcement. Ferran's 29/11/2 is much easier to read as reception and emergence through timing. So the final did something beautiful. It let Yamal remain the symbol of the doorway, but it gave Ferran the actual key. That is the cleanest way I can say it. Yamal looked like the prophecy of the next era. Ferran looked like the hand chosen to make that prophecy real. That difference matters because people often make numerology too literal. They assume that if a player carries future energy, he must personally score the decisive goal or the reading was wrong. But real symbolic systems are often subtler than that. They distribute roles. One figure may carry the image. Another may carry the act. One may represent what is opening. Another may represent who gets selected to finalize the opening. That is exactly how this World Cup final feels. And the scoreline reinforces it. Spain won 1-0. 1-0 reduces to 1. 1 is beginning, authorship, identity, first claim, and the clean birth of a new chapter. That is why the result feels so sharp. 1-0 is not crowded. It is not noisy. It is not a chaotic exchange of goals that blurs the meaning of the winner. It is a scoreline with very little extra language inside it. It says someone wrote the first line of the next page and then closed the book on argument. That is perfect for a team like Spain in this tournament. 5 disrupts, 1 claims. That is the sequence. Spain's 23/5 broke the old order's rhythm, and the 1 on the scoreboard signed the new identity into place. Now add Argentina back into the picture, because this story becomes stronger, not weaker, when we remember what Spain had to move through in order to win. Argentina reduces to 44, then to 8. 8 is authority, structure, material consequence, championship burden, and the visible object at the end of struggle. 8 is one of the most convincing final numbers in numerology because it understands pressure, it understands responsibility, it understands the trophy as an object that must be possessed, protected, and paid for. That is why Argentina never felt symbolically fake in this final. Argentina felt heavy, and heaviness matters, because 5 only becomes historical when it breaks through real 8-level pressure. If Spain had beaten a flimsy opponent under a light emotional sky, the numerological meaning would be weaker. But that is not what happened. Spain had to win a final, still carrying championship weight, legacy weight, and the emotional density of Messi's era. That is why the victory feels expensive. Now bring the date in. July 19th gives 8 at the month and day layer. The full date, July 19th, 2026, reduces to 9. So this final contained 8, 9, and 5 all at once. 8 gave the match trophy gravity. 9 gave it closure, farewell, and the feeling of one huge football chapter reaching its emotional edge. 5 gave it movement, disruption, and generational transfer. That is why the final was so symbolically rich, and it is also why Ferran's goal feels so exact. He did not score in a lightweight game. He scored inside an 8-weight arena under a 9-atmosphere sky, at a 7-minute point of delayed revelation for a 5-shaped champion, using a 1-shaped scoreline to open the next era. That is an extraordinary amount of symbolic agreement for one goal. And once you see that, the role split inside Spain becomes even clearer. Yamal still matters enormously. His 19/1 did not disappear just because Ferran scored. If anything, Yamal's number becomes easier to understand after the result. The point of his one energy was not that he had to be the final touch on the ball. The point was that Spain as champion had to feel like a rival, initiation, and the public installation of a new cycle. That happened. It happened whether or not Yamal scored. His role was to make the entire Spain story feel like the opening of a new room. Ferran's role was to decide who physically stepped into that room first. And numerology often likes that kind of split. The visible symbol and the finishing instrument do not always have to be the same person. That is also one reason the result feels more mature than a simple youth coronation. If Yamal had scored early and the whole final had become a loud, obvious passing of the crown image, the symbolic reading would actually be cruder. Instead, the match stayed tight. It stayed heavy. It stayed unresolved. Then, after the normal frame failed to produce an answer, a more hidden player completed the act. That is a much deeper ending. It says the next era was not handed over in a clean photo op. It had to be revealed. And 7 loves revelation. We should also say something honest about Messi here, because he is still part of why this goal feels so large. Messi's symbolic role in the final did not vanish because he lost. The full date 9 still made the match feel like closure, ending, and public summing up. That is why the night never felt emotionally light. Even when Spain looked more like the future-facing team, the atmosphere of the final still carried the long shadow of legacy. That is not a contradiction. It is the point. Spain did not win in a vacuum. It won inside the closing emotional weather of a football age shaped by Messi's meaning. That made the triumph stronger, because 5 is never more convincing than when it proves it can move history forward while the previous center of gravity is still fully present. So yes, Messi still held the ending energy. Argentina still held the 8 pressure architecture. But Spain held the tournament identity, and Ferran Torres ended up being the human tool through which that identity became a final result. That is why this goal deserves more than a tactical description. It deserves a symbolic one. Why Ferran? Because his numbers suit the player who reads the late opening rather than the player who needs to dominate the whole film from the first minute. His 29 gives 11 and 2, which fit intuition, timing, and appearing in relationship to the exact gap that finally opens. His full date 6 fits responsibility and finishing. He is numerologically believable as the man who completes the scene after others helped build it. Why the 106th minute? Because 7 is the hidden answer number. The final was not ready to reveal itself in the ordinary frame. The first 90 minutes were the visible argument. Extra time became the chamber where the deeper answer was allowed to surface. Why Spain? Because Spain did not merely carry a useful team number. It carried the same 23/5 signature as the 23rd FIFA World Cup itself. The the champion, and the event were speaking the same language. When that happens, a victory can feel less like a random outcome and more like a narrative lock clicking into place. And why does all of this still feel so emotionally big? Because the scoreline was 1, because the timing was 7, because the atmosphere was 9, because the occasion was 8, and because the team that matched the tournament most cleanly was 5. That is not one isolated symbol. That is a complete architecture. If you want the shortest version of this whole reading, it is this. Yamal opened the door. Messi darkened the sky with ending energy. Argentina brought the weight of the crown. Spain carried the number of the World Cup itself. And Ferran Torres was the player chosen to write the one-line ending when the match finally reached its hidden hour. That is why the 106th minute winner feels so memorable, not only because it won the trophy, but because it feels narratively fitted to the whole event. This was not just Spain scoring late. It was the 23rd World Cup letting its own team number champion speak through the right player at the right minute. And that is why, numerologically, Ferran Torres does not look accidental here at all. He looks chosen for the finish. You can leave your own reading in the comments, but there is no need to force every football moment into superstition. Sometimes numerology is most useful when it helps us explain why a result feels larger, cleaner, or stranger than a normal result should. Spain still needed the football quality to win. Ferran still needed the composure to finish. Argentina still needed to be overcome in reality, not only in symbols. But once the match ended, the deeper pattern became unusually visible. Spain looked like the tournament's moving code. Yamal looked like the future in the doorway. Ferran Torres looked like the chosen finisher. And the 106th minute looked like the hidden clock on which the final was always waiting to tell the truth. Thank you for spending this time with Hidden Number Files, and take care until we meet again.